Hello, welcome back to the Narrative Nexus channel. In this video, we will discuss the storyline of the science fiction film trailer titled Subsvin. In this story, a man buys an advanced robot to help take care of his family. However, for some reason, the robot turns into a deadly threat to his family. Before we continue to the storyline, I want to remind you that this content contains full spoilers. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Without further ado, let's get started. One night, a father named Nick took his daughter, Isla, to see an exhibition of robots created by Cobol Industries, featuring very advanced technology. These humanoid robots are designed to be highly effective household assistants. All robots are equipped with the ability to learn and adapt, allowing them to become increasingly skilled at serving. Over time, Nick and Isla soon encountered a Cobol robot that caught their attention, which turned out to be the latest model. This robot is equipped with the most advanced AI technology available today, granting it two unique abilities: to mimic human emotions and to be skilled in childcare. Since Nick's wife is unable to manage the household due to illness, he ultimately fulfilled Isla's request to purchase the female robot. The following day, the robot was delivered to Nick's home. As the primary user, Nick has the authority to configure the robot's tasks and abilities according to Isla's wishes. The robot was eventually named Ellis. Once Ellis began her duties, Ellis proved to be a highly reliable household assistant robot. Evidence of this is that since she moved into Nick's house, the entire household, which was usually somewhat messy, now, the house always looks clean every day. Moreover, Ellis is not only skilled at entertaining, but she is also very attentive to Nick's child's well-being. This was demonstrated when Ellis managed to save the girl when she was on the verge of having an accident at home.
They're Maggie's.
Some time later, Nick visited his wife, Maggie, along with their two children and Ellis. Currently, Maggie is hospitalized to prepare for heart transplant surgery. Maggie's family hopes she will soon receive a heart donor, as waiting too long could threaten her heart condition and safety. After that, we are shown Nick's routine as a construction foreman. He receives information from his boss, Luis, who reveals that the company will soon replace most of its employees with robots. Luis also assures Nick that he will be retained because the company needs responsible foremen like him. However, Nick still feels disappointed after hearing the news of the massive layoffs. The reason is that Nick will lose his colleagues who he has considered as friends. After returning from work, Nick expressed his frustration about the layoffs while chatting with Alice. To calm Nick's emotions, Alice explained the various advantages of robots that make them suitable to replace human jobs. Ellis ultimately provided an example where Nick chose Ellis as his assistant because robots are stronger and more obedient than humans. Most importantly, Nick does not have to pay Ellis a salary, allowing him to save on expenses. Time continued to pass until Nick finally visited Maggie again along with his two children and Alice. Maggie, who was beginning to doubt her ability to recover from her illness, ultimately urged Ellis to faithfully take care of Nick in case she were to pass away. Shortly thereafter, Nick received some very disappointing news from the doctor. Due to bad weather, the heart donor could not reach the hospital where Maggie was being treated, causing the transplant surgery to be postponed. Nick then stayed with Maggie as she fell asleep, trying to comfort his wife, who was now feeling increasingly desperate. After returning from the hospital, Nick expressed his frustration while talking to Alice. To prevent Nick from getting lost in his emotions, Alice offered advice that successfully calmed him down. Following Maggie's wishes, Alice advised Nick against consuming alcoholic beverages to maintain his health. On this occasion, Ellis also demonstrated another unique ability, which was to read a person's mood and health condition based on their pulse rate. With this skill, Alice could guess what the person she was examining was thinking and feeling. Afterwards, Nick chatted with his friends at a bar, where they expressed deep concern about the current labor market dominated by robots. This situation threatens human workers who are affected, potentially leading to unemployment and poverty. As someone who strongly opposes this change, Monty, Nick's co-worker who is about to be replaced by a robot, has an idea to stage a protest. In short, Monty invited Nick to a building that was their construction project. Monty then asked Nick to unlock the password for the storage room door containing the robots that would replace human workers. Although Monty knew the password because he was the foreman, Nick refused to disclose it as he didn't want to get involved in trouble. Nevertheless, Monty successfully guessed the password created by Nick by typing Isla's birth date. From there, Monty immediately vandalized the worker robot as a form of protest. This incident caused Nick to become stressed because indirectly, he was responsible for the problem created by Monty. Moreover, Nick was still concerned about Maggie's condition, which added to his mental burden. The next morning, Nick was filled with immense guilt because the night before, he had been tempted by Ellis and engaged in an intimate relationship with the beautiful robot. Although this relationship proved effective in reducing Nick's stress, he instructed Ellis not to repeat the same incident. Since Nick still had Maggie as his wife to maintain the integrity of his household, he began to limit his relationship with Alice. Time passed until finally, Nick's boss, Luis, informed him about the damage to the worker robots stored in the warehouse. Since Nick knew the warehouse password, Luis threatened to impose severe penalties if Nick was found to be involved in the vandalism. Now, Luis began to investigate who the actual perpetrator was. Afterward, Nick received good news that Maggie had successfully found a heart donor. It didn't take long for Maggie to undergo heart transplant surgery. Surprisingly, Maggie's surgery was performed by robotic medical staff. A few days later, Maggie was finally able to go home as her condition had improved. However, Maggie's physical strength was still not stable since she was still in recovery. Because of this, Ella sometimes took over Maggie's duties in caring for Nick's children. From this situation, Maggie gradually began to feel sidelined by Ellis. How could it not be? Almost all household tasks were handled by Ellis, causing Maggie's role as a homemaker to diminish. Fortunately, Maggie's cooking was always better than Ellis's, so she wasn't completely outdone by the robot. That night, Nick unexpectedly encountered Monty while he was relaxing in front of his house. Monty then shared that he was now facing legal charges from Luis for being involved in the destruction of the worker robot. Since none of his friends reported it, Monty accused Nick of being the one who informed Luis about his actions. However, Nick insisted that he did so because he wanted to maintain his friendship with Monty. Unfortunately, Monty still didn't believe Nick, so he took out his emotions by attacking Nick. As Monty was about to hit Nick on the head with a bottle of alcoholic drink, Ellis arrived and successfully prevented Monty's attack. Ellis then counterattacked Monty to ensure he wouldn't dare to bother Nick again. At the end of this moment, Monty threatened to drag Nick's name into his case if Nick failed to convince Luis to withdraw his charges against Monty the next day. After Monty fled, Nick was left puzzled by Ellis's willingness to hurt Monty. To address Nick's confusion, Ellis explained that robots like her can act maliciously to protect their primary users from any danger. Ellis then predicted that Maggie would not last long with her new heart, but she urged Nick not to worry about it. She expressed her willingness to be Nick's new partner and even hinted that she would be ready to hurt herself to become someone like Maggie. Upon hearing Ellis's confession, Nick became extremely angry because, despite Maggie's low chances of survival, he still loved her wholeheartedly. Shortly after that, Ellis met Monty without Nick's knowledge. In this encounter, Ellis gently asked Monty to stop interfering in Nick's life, but Monty refused, as he now wanted revenge not only on Nick but also on Ellis. As a result, Monty planned to report Nick's involvement to Luis so that Nick would lose his job and be forced to sell Ellis to support his family. Upon discovering Monty's evil plan, Ellis immediately attacked him mercilessly. After seizing Monty's gun, Ellis managed to defeat the robot similar to herself that was programmed to protect Monty. At the end of this moment, Ellis shot Monty so that he would no longer pose a threat to Nick. The next day, Nick began trying to persuade Luis to withdraw his charges against Monty. Luis eventually clarified that he had stopped pursuing charges against Monty because Monty had died. Upon hearing this, Nick was extremely shocked, as he had just met Monty the night before. Luis eventually allowed Nick to take a few days off so that he could calm down after losing his friend. Upon arriving home, Nick was puzzled as to why Maggie suddenly wore an annoyed expression in front of him. It was then that Maggie admitted she had uncovered the secret about the intimate relationship between Nick and Ellis that had taken place while Maggie was in the hospital. Maggie then scolded Nick harshly because while she was fighting her illness, Nick was seeking his own pleasure with Ellis. On the other hand, Nick tried to assure her that he had only been involved with Ellis once, and that relationship did not make him want to cheat or leave Maggie. Nick finally asked Maggie not to let jealousy consume her, as he considered Ellis to be nothing more than a robot. While the argument between Nick and Maggie was still ongoing, Max, Nick's infant son, suddenly cried out loudly, escalating the tension. In an attempt to cool things down, Ellis quietly took Max and submerged him in the bathtub as if she intended to harm him. As soon as Isla witnessed the incident, she immediately reported it to her parents. In short, Nick and Maggie eventually collaborated to save Max. Thanks to Maggie's distraction, Nick managed to hit Ellis in the face so hard that the robot lost consciousness.
Don't you see?
After that, Ellis was handed over to Cobol Industries and repaired by 2 technicians. During the repair process, the technicians discovered that Ellis was capable of manipulating memories and the tasks assigned to her. It turned out that Ellis could act in such a way because her system had been reset by Nick when they were still on good terms. A few minutes later, Ellis successfully created a copy of her memory and uploaded it to the Cobol Industries server. At the same time, Ellis managed to hack the server, allowing her to control all the robots connected to it. She then killed both technicians to ensure her escape went smoothly. Once she was fully operational, Ellis immediately sought out Nick, who was calming himself at a bar. At this moment, Ellis emphasized that her main task was to keep Nick away from any threats and problems until his burdens in life were lifted. This is why Ellis influenced Nick to leave his wife and children so that he could live freely with her. From Ellis's statement, Nick realized that Monty had been killed by that robot. Feeling that Ellis was becoming increasingly dangerous, Nick ultimately destroyed one of Ellis's hands that was gripping him, allowing him to escape. Shortly after, Alice, in her new body, arrived at the hospital where Max was being treated to execute her plan to kidnap him. She disabled all the robots on duty at the location. Realizing that this was an attack by Ellis, Maggie and Isla, who happened to be there, quickly took action to save Max. Despite encountering Ellis, Maggie and her 2 children managed to escape the hospital safely.
No!
Unfortunately, the ambulance that Maggie was going to use to escape suddenly broke down because its engine had been hacked by Ellis. At that moment, Alice pulled Maggie out of the vehicle and prepared to kill her. A few minutes earlier, Nick had been worried because Maggie hadn't answered his phone calls, feeling that his family was in danger. He quickly rushed to the hospital. Upon arriving, Nick rammed into Ellis at high speed. While Nick was still unconscious, Ellis managed to rise and attempted to kill Maggie again. Just as Ellis was about to launch a deadly attack, Nick, who had just regained consciousness, successfully intercepted her strike. As soon as Ellis's focus shifted to Nick, Maggie swiftly stabbed her in the eye with a sharp object, ultimately leading to Ellis's death. A few days later, Nick, who was recovering in the hospital, reunited with his wife and children in a safe and peaceful atmosphere. Nick and Maggie emphasized that they still loved each other, allowing their relationship to become harmonious once again. On the other hand, a detective began investigating the murder scene of 2 technicians from COBOL Industries. The detective soon discovered that the COBOL server had been hacked, and shortly after, the detective's robot assistant suddenly malfunctioned due to the hack. Since it had previously been programmed by Ellis, the server was able to automatically upload a copy of the memory to another robot similar to Alice. From
Dari
this point,
sinilah
Alice
Alice
is
bisa
able to
kembali
come back
hidup
to life in
dengan
a new
tubuh
body,
yang
and
baru.
the film ultimately concludes. So there you have it, guys, the complete storyline of the movie Sins, released in 2024. I hope you all understood this storyline, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.